So the innovation to inclusion interventions are designed to achieve this in three ways. One is focusing on the collection and analysis of reliable and comparable disaggregated data across countries on disability and employment. Secondly, on engaging organizations of persons with disability in the collection of data and enhancing their capacity to use the data for advocacy. And thirdly, to influence mainstream employment policies and strategies. So in the next 40 to 50 minutes, we will focus on two of these areas, which relates to influencing mainstream labor market policies and having access to disaggregated data. On Wednesday, we have a dedicated session focused on the important role that organizations of persons with disability play in shifting the disability ecosystem through advocacy and holding key stakeholders to account. Today, we have two colleagues from World Bank to share learnings on how the bank has influenced inclusive policymaking in Bangladesh. As part of the i2i program, World Bank has developed a policy note with recommendations for inclusive employment to influence mainstream programs and policies in Bangladesh. Anika Raman, who is a senior social protection economist with the Social Protection and Jobs Global Practice at the World Bank office in Dhaka in Bangladesh, is with us to explore this a bit further. So Anika works across the World Bank's 1.6 billion social protection and jobs portfolio, supporting policy dialogue and programs financing in the areas covering early years and human capital targeting international migration and informal job sector. So Anika, could you share some of World Bank's findings in the areas that you've identified to support the Bangladeshi government to create a more inclusive employment environment?
Thank you, Saku. Let me just take a minute to share my screen. Yes. So thank you. As you mentioned, I'm Anika Rahman. I'm a senior social protection economist with the World Bank in Bangladesh. And maybe just before maybe before I go to addressing your question, let me just give a quick overview of the bank's position on disability, which is to say that we recognize that the global development and poverty reduction agenda will not be effective unless one addresses the inequalities faced by people with disabilities and ensures their participation at all stages of development. And so we are guided by our disability and accountability framework, which lays out the principles of our engagement on disability. And this includes mainstreaming disability into the bank's operations and systems and services, while also building internal capacity to support clients. Moreover, we know that implementation of the CRPD, the convention, requires a shift in systems and policies, and there may be a lack of technical know-how of good practice examples. And so the framework recognizes that the World Bank has a role to play in providing technical assistance to client governments. All of our operations also follow an environmental and social framework. And basically this provides for non-discrimination of persons with disability along a number of key obligations, which I'll just quickly run through. One is to identify the risks and impacts faced by, from our projects faced by persons with disabilities and ensuring that mitigation measures are put in place. Secondly is that the standards on labor and working conditions are followed. And this includes the need for reasonable accommodation for persons with disabilities. Thirdly, that the principles of universal design, universal access are applied. And fourthly, that specific measures are taken to ensure the meaningful participation of all stakeholders, including persons with disabilities. So now, if I come, Saku, to your point on our areas of engagement, in the past, the bank has had an operation with the Ministry of Social Welfare in Bangladesh to enhance services to persons with disabilities by expanding and upgrading the disability support centers. We also have an ongoing operation with the ministry to improve the efficiency and transparency of some of their key cash transfer programs. through modernized service delivery. But what I really wanted to focus on today, as you mentioned in your introduction, is the policy note that we have recently prepared. And this basically looks at the current policy and program environment supporting inclusion of persons with disability into the labor market. And it makes recommendations along a number of areas, which you'll see listed in the slide: the legal framework, opportunities to enhance or employment, skills development, social protection, etc. And so this note now provides a basis for our policy dialogue with government. And so we've used the findings to provide our comments on the government's 8th five-year plan, which was recently approved and published. But beyond that, it also informs our own operations. And so what I'll focus on in my next few slides, it's taking a few of those recommendations. And I mean, one is, yes, that the bank is involved in policy dialogue with government, but another area through which we can leverage our position to influence program and policy direction is through our operations, right? And in that sense, it also builds the technical capacity of government through the doing of it. So one on data, I mean, we recognize, that having accurate and regularly updated data is essential for policy making and appropriate budgetary allocations. And so the note recommends that the standardization of disability data collection across major national surveys. And the statistical agency, Bangladesh Bureau of Statistics, they've already started taking steps in the right direction. They had included the Washington Group questions in the household income and expenditure survey. But what more needs to be done? And so we do have an ongoing engagement through another team through supporting the National Strategy for Development of Statistics. And through this, we expect that to improve the agency's ability to produce core statistics, quality core statistics, including inclusion of the Washington Group questions across the other national surveys, and be able to provide access to them in a timely manner to policymakers and to the public. On skills development, I won't spend too much time because the following presentation, my colleague will go into this, but basically the overall recommendations are on ensuring existing programs are made more inclusive for persons with disabilities through a number of mechanisms, but largely improving accessibility and outreach, and also changing mindsets and attitudes of employers. If I come to employment, so we know that the labor market, I mean, before I get to labor market interventions, the social protection, dedicated social protection towards a person with a disability is limited within the overall social protection budget. It's roughly about 2% of the budget. Of this, 80% goes towards the disability allowance, and the remaining 20% is spread quite thinly across a number of programs, mostly focused on providing care services, but also on some limited labor market interventions. And so and this is not unique to persons with disabilities. More broadly, and if you look at the whole social protection portfolio, about 8 to 13% of the budget goes towards labor market interventions. And these are important because they provide a ladder. They can provide a ladder for the poor and vulnerable. And so from the social protection team, which I come from, our focus is really on less educated, low-income households who may otherwise be excluded for various reasons from taking advantage of the formal systems and that are out there. And so one of the kind of the dialogue that we're engaged in with government more broadly is on scaling up these the labor market interventions, specifically through economic inclusion programs. And this is all the more important in the it's not quite the aftermath of COVID, but the recovery phase of COVID, because they would help build the resilience of low-income households. And so the concept behind, the concept behind these behind economic inclusion programs is that low-income households, they face multiple simultaneously binding constraints that limit their opportunity to be employed or restrict them to low return economic activities. This is all the more compounded for persons with disabilities, given they face additional exclusion barriers. So the ability to, or the opportunities for obtaining skills, mentorship, tapping into networks that provide job matching, but also limited business knowledge and access to finance. And so the way an economic inclusion program would work is to identify the services that are required and provide them as a bundle of services tailored to the needs of the individual. So this is something we are currently, one of the things we're currently engaged in is developing a model, a kind of prototype, if you will, of a program specifically for vulnerable groups. And this would include potentially persons with disabilities. And so some of the activities we're engaged in right now is carrying out a profiling analysis to understand the constraints that are faced by a particular demographic, carrying out a market assessment to look at possible livelihood opportunities, and then a service provision mapping. And these would be at location-based, so that you can map and identify resources available for both capacity building and other services and resources such as access to finance. And our plan is that once we put this, and we're working with government on this, once we put this model together, that it could be piloted through any one of the government social protection programs, given it has the advantage of already being engaged with the target group. And so this is something hopefully we'll be able to make good progress on. Finally, on monitoring and evaluation, on this, we know government has put together quite a comprehensive action plan to operationalize the provisions of its Disability Act. But what it lacks is an adequate monitoring and evaluation framework. And this is something that has also been raised through the list of issues by the CRPD committee. The current indicators are either vaguely defined or don't look beyond the inputs and outputs towards the outcomes. And overall, they just haven't been implemented through any mechanism for data collection, computation, and reporting. And so what we'd like to do, this is again something that we are proposing to embark on, is develop a comprehensive set of indicators that would be relevant and measurable, and one to allow the government to report on its action plan, and not just the action plan, but it would also contribute towards reporting on the CRPD, the regular reporting on the CRPD. But it would also help identify areas where further resources are needed, whether that be financial or technical. And so with that, let me stop here. But I hope that provides some, I hope that provides some overview of our work and how we look to support these incremental reforms to the ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anika. And I believe that the full sort of the policy note will be available in the coming weeks. And just to also remind people, we can use the Q&A chat box. You could start sort of like posing any questions that you may have for Anika now itself. So like Anika said, skills development or upskilling is an important area of focus to ensure that people with disability are able to compete equally in the labor market. An i2i program aims to improve employability skills of 10,000 people with disabilities across Bangladesh and Kenya. So working with training and vocational institutes to make curriculum inclusive, exploring accessible online training platforms for e-learning courses are some of those key strategies used by i2i to upskill people with disabilities. So now I want to introduce you to Shiro Nakata, who is a senior education economist with the Education Global Practice at the World Bank South Asia region on inclusive skills development practices in Bangladesh. So Shiro supports analytical works and financing on areas covering basic education, TVETs, and higher education. And more recently, he has been designing a new skills project in Bangladesh with International Development Association for 300 million US dollars. So Shiro, it would be great if you could share some of the key strategies the bank has been supporting the government of Bangladesh on inclusive skills development. Over to you, Shiro.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Saku. And thanks for organizers for giving us this opportunity to make a brief presentation on the work that we do in Bangladesh. So my name is Shiro Nakata. I'm, as Saku has kindly introduced, I'm a senior education economist at the World Bank. I'm based in Bangkok, actually, and as a part of the team that looks after the education portfolio in South Asia region. And I mostly look after our operations in higher education and skills development. And right now, we are preparing a new operation in skills development in Bangladesh that is expected to actually start the implementation around August this year. And the project is called the Accelerating and Strengthening Skills for Economic Transformation. And in short, we call it the ASSET project. So my brief presentation today will mostly discuss the challenges that we are facing in skills development sector in Bangladesh in terms of inclusiveness for the persons with disabilities and what this ASSET project is planning on doing about it. Okay, so to start with, let me first quickly discuss what challenges that we are facing in promoting the inclusiveness in skills development in Bangladesh. And first of all, the skills development is a bit unique in the education space. Unlike the basic education, which is compulsory and getting access to it is in principle a matter of human rights. The studying in technical education is basically an optional endeavor, and usually with a very clear expected outcome, that is, getting employed or attaining the job-ready skills. So therefore, ensuring the quality and job market relevance is the first step towards improving the inclusiveness, actually. And unfortunately, we are still suffering significantly in this area in Bangladesh. There are many, many serious questions and doubts about the quality and job market relevance of the training programs for everyone, including for the students with disabilities. So if the employers have doubts about the usefulness of the training program, why would you even bother sending your kids, regardless of the disability, to such useless training program? Right? And secondly, the TVET and technical education and training is still suffering from the very poor social perception. It's often seen as a less desirable pathway for less competent students or problematic students, which makes it even harder to generate demands for technical education and among all these students, but especially among the students with disabilities. And also the TVET, technical education, is often seen as a kind of a boys' track. And so we've seen significant improvement in the past years in the female enrollment, but still the female students accounts for only about 15% of the enrollment in the TVET sector. And they tend to be concentrated in a small number of quote unquote female-friendly subjects, such as dressmaking, ICT, and design, and so on and so forth. So this actually limits the available options for the female trainees with disabilities. And most importantly, actually many training institutions in Bangladesh are very poorly equipped to accommodate trainees with disabilities, to be very honest. Institutions generally lack basic inclusiveness facilities such as access ramps. And at the same time, the overall quality of the facilities is also quite poor in many institutions because of the decades of underinvestment in past decades. And many institutions are still using the old facilities and training equipment, and sometimes they inherit those equipments since 1970s, for instance. So they need a lot of investment in renewing those classrooms and workshops and teaching aids and residential spaces. So those investments should be made with the appropriate accommodation for trainees with disabilities. And finally, we acknowledge that we don't actually have much data and information, reliable information about the trainees with disabilities. We don't know for sure, for instance, how many trainees with disabilities are studying in TVET system and what kind of disabilities they have and what their employment outcomes are and where the TVET institutions are still lacking accessible facilities and so on and so forth. There's a lot to do for enhancing the data capacity in this regard. Right. But as far as the government policy is concerned, the inclusiveness agenda is quite prominently highlighted, including the inclusiveness for the persons with disabilities. The National Skills Development Policy 2020, which still is in a draft state, it calls for a whole society approach. That means they want to address the skills development needs of people from all walks of life and people with different needs. And it is the government's target to allocate at least 5% of the intake capacity to trainees with disabilities. They are nowhere close to actually meeting this target, but the government has this target. And this National Skills Development Policy actually proposes a number of ambitious and actually important measures and reform actions for enhancing the inclusiveness, and including the upgradation of the institutional facilities and training up managers and teachers on how to work with the trainees with disabilities. And one critically important action is to work with private sectors and employers to raise the awareness about the skilling of people with disabilities and their employment and their work potentials and productivity potentials. And the policy, this skills policy also calls for the customization to be made in curriculum and delivery methods that take account of the needs of the trainees with disabilities. And the policy also recommends a reasonable accommodation for delivery and assessment and the provision of counseling for trainees with disabilities. And also, last but not least, the policy emphasizes the need for linking skills training with employment outcome, that needless to say. And all these measures are actually extremely important, not only for the trainees with special needs, but for all the trainees in the system. So it's very important that the investments in these areas, they're going to have to do it anyway. And those investment needs to be made in such a way that takes account of the needs and the presence of trainees with the special needs. And so this is a quick overview of the asset project. The project has two main objectives in its project development objective. One is to improve the quality and job market linkage of the skills development program. And the other one is to actually focusing on the enhancing the inclusiveness of the training programs. And these are the areas of interventions of the asset project. And under each of the subcomponent, there will be measures to be taken to improve the accessibility for the trainees with disabilities. And these are all in alignment with the National Skills Development Policy. And in the component one, for instance, where we are strengthening the formal TVET programs, both for the diploma courses and short courses, the project will provide the institutions with grants to invest in the facilities and teaching and learning practices. So it's important the project will make sure that the institution's investment plans are well informed about the needs of trainees with disabilities, and the institutions make investment in universal design And also they partner up with the disability organizations in their localities. And project will also train teachers about the pedagogical skills that's needed for to include the trainees with disabilities in their classrooms. And also the institution can also do the institutional audits about the accessibility of the training facilities. The project will also work very closely and extensively with employers and private companies under the component 2. And our partner includes the BBDN, and Bangladesh Business and Disability Network. BBDN is an extremely important partner of the project to mainstream this inclusiveness agenda. And they will conduct, in partnership with the project, the awareness raising programs for employers and TVET institutions and many other programs that's targeted to the inclusiveness. And all the project funded enterprise-based training programs will have to demonstrate and how they would actually include the trainees with disabilities. And under the component 3, the project will also support the government to develop awareness and the capacity of the policymakers and improve data availability related to the inclusiveness. So the project will address in this inclusiveness agenda from the central level in the ministry and also at the same time, the institution level in the training institutions. And finally, also this asset project will have the key performance indicator, as we call it, that specifically tracks the share of the trainees with disabilities in our supported training programs. And we believe that that KPI will actually help us to keep the focus of the project and all the stakeholders of the project on this critical inclusiveness agenda. So all in all, with all these measures in place, we strongly believe that the asset project will be a game changer for this disability inclusiveness agenda in skills development space in Bangladesh. So thank you very much. That's all from my presentation, and looking forward to more discussion and learning from the conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shiro. Thanks a lot for the information on inclusive skills development initiatives in Bangladesh. And I'm sure there would be, I've seen a couple of questions, but we can sort of take them up during the question and answer session. So now I am honored to introduce Mr. Gholam Rabbani from the Bangladesh Computer Council. Mr. Rabbani is the Deputy Project Director of Bangladeshi government's project called Empowerment of Persons with Disability, including Neurodevelopment Disorders for Information Technology. He has been serving the Bangladesh Computer Council as an analyst since 2015. Mr. Rabbani has been providing ICT-related technical expertise to other government agencies as well. So skills training through accessible online platforms has been one of the key areas promoted through the i2i program as a strategy to support people with disabilities enter the labor market and upskill for career progression. So Mr. Rabbani, could you share with us some insight of the Bangladesh government initiatives, especially the Bangladesh Computer Council's initiatives designed to upskill people with disabilities so that they are not left behind in the world of work?
Yeah, thank you very much, Ms. Shukuntala Mappa, to give me the opportunity to say about our activities regarding persons with disabilities in respect of our organization, Bangladesh Computer Council. And so I would like to share some slides. Before saying my presenting my presentation, I would like to say about my organization, Bangladesh Computer Council. Bangladesh Computer Council is under Information and Communication Technology Division. This is under Ministry of Post, Telecommunication and Information Technology. Actually, Bangladesh Computer Council is going to fill up some targets that we say here, that aims and objective of BCC. BCC actually works on promote the effective application and expansion of ICT, connectivity, that is infrastructure development, develop human resource for effective use of ICT, formulate and implement national strategies and policies regarding computer and ICT, cooperate with the government and other agencies to implement the objectives of the national ICT plans, advise and encourage the government and other agencies for the use of computer and ICT, determine the standard and specification for computer and ICT at the national level. So in my first slide, you can see actually initially BCC was concentrated on policy making and standard making these activities. But nowadays, Bangladesh Computer Council is making throughout the countrywide infrastructure, ICT infrastructure. So BCC is continuing infrastructure development of the government through several development programs to facilitate access to government services from root level for the citizens. At present, Bangladesh Computer Council implementing 14 projects, and one of them special project we are implementing for the backward people of the society, that is persons with disabilities. As you know, about 10% people of the total population in my country are disabled. So without opportunity to access in or use ICT for the person with disabilities, it's not possible to uniform and sustainable development of a country. So realizing these things, Bangladesh Computer Council from 2011 is working for the person with disabilities for the empowerment as part of inclusive development. At the starting of these activities, it was centralized. That is, it was only from BCC Dhaka head office. Now the activities is running throughout the country. And to implement these activities throughout the country, Bangladesh government ICT division from 2007 has been implementing the project that is empowerment of persons with disabilities, including neurodevelopment disorder through ICT. And this project implementing in the duration of 2007 to 2021. The objective of the project to develop the person with disabilities a skilled manpower on ICT, promote their employment and make them contributing citizen to build digital Bangladesh and achieve the goals of Vision 2021 and Sustainable Development Goals SDG. Here I mentioned some major activities of our project. Development of software, that is, we mentioned here 2 parts, that is contents and applications. In application, we can say that is e-learning platform, job portal, mobile apps. And these applications are specialized only for the person with disabilities. And we have developed those applications maintaining the accessibility guidelines. And then establishing of ICT resource center. From here, I can say that Bangladesh Computer Council under the project is implementing or providing training activities for the person with disabilities. And so under the project, we have established 7 resource ICT center throughout the country. And those resource center is under regional offices of Bangladesh Computer Council. So as I mentioned, ICT training for persons with disabilities through the ICT Resource Center, we are providing this training. And then another works we are doing that disability orientation training. And the next slide we will explain this. Job placement assistance and then job popularize ICT among persons with disabilities. That is, we are arranging seminar, workshop, and campaigns activities throughout the country. As I mentioned in previous slide about the software, under the project we have developed audio and video tutorials as learning content for the person with disabilities. This content, especially in ICT field, about 350 tutorials we have developed, and those tutorials are now uploaded in our developed e-learning platform. So our main task in the development of software, another works is e-learning platform. And another resource is job portal, database of potential candidates for personal disabilities. And also we have developed a mobile apps to use by the smartphone for the personal disabilities. So as I mentioned, we are providing ICT training for the personal disabilities. As regarding market analysis or market demand, we are providing 5 number of trainings for the personal disabilities. That is introduction to computer application packages, graphics design and multimedia, web and mobile application development, software quality assurance, and digital marketing. And here I mentioned that Bangladesh Computer Council, since it is only deals with the ICT activities. So we are working for the personal disabilities to make them empowerment through only ICT sector or ICT. We have developed 60 tutorials, specialized tutorials, we can say, for the visual impaired person. This tutorial will be designed to introduce visually impaired to various computer applications and internet browsing. Microsoft Office application suites and orientation with screen readers will help them to perform day-by-day activities in the workplace. Training materials for capacity building of key services providers. The purpose of the training is making awareness among the key service providers and giving them orientation training about disability and dignity, so that they can serve all individuals in a proper, efficient manner. So in this slide, I would like to say that we are giving training through online for 3 categories. One is community disability expert, we can call it CDE, and health allied professionals, and primary school teachers. So as I mentioned in previous slide, we have developed one e-learning platform. This e-learning platform, especially, we have developed maintaining the W3CG guidelines and make it for the personal disabilities accessible. So I think this type of initiations for developing these applications in Bangladesh first time, and right now I can say that last on the dated 28 has inaugurated this e-learning platform for the use of personal disabilities. And then I can say here that about job portal. Job portal is like you know, the job it will work as a bridge for the employer and job seekers. So recruiters will have a section in this job portal to post their jobs, to get the suitable research for the trained research pool. The job bank should be smart enough to convey the job updates to the relevant skill resources to be notified. Recruiters will be able to filter the appropriate candidates through this portal, and also job seekers should find out their job notice. And we have added here one thing that, as you know, the disabled peoples are not able to move anywhere at any time. So in this job portal, we have added one thing that is interview session, and this interview session will be conducted through video conferencing. And so I think during this pandemic situation, like this situation, it will be very helpful for the person with disabilities to meet the employer.
Mr. Rabani,
So,
sorry, just to say that, you know, you've run out of time. So maybe if you can look at wrapping it up in the next minute.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we have also one database, and it also included for the personal disabilities all information, and also mobile apps. It will help for the personal disabilities to remote use and by the smartphone. And as I said, all the things. So another works is job fair. After training, providing the training for the personal disabilities, we arrange a job fair for the personal disabilities. And in the job fair, job employer are come to this place and meet them with job seeker, and they recruit from this place. And about 589 peoples now getting get their job from the job fair. And so you can see here some pictures about our activities, seminar campaigns, and training, opening ceremony activities. So job fair activities, many people come from all the divisions of the country and meet them with employer. So thank you very much. I think this is my presentation about activities of the person with disabilities from Bangladesh Computer Council. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rabani. So maybe if there are any questions, please to either to Anika, Shiro, or Mr. Rabani, you could on the Q&A box. Let me move now to the second area of systems change that i2i has been focusing on to make disability inclusion outcomes in the labor market sustainable. So comprehensive and relevant disability data is essential for establishing situational understanding of disability, monitor and implement inclusive strategies and policies relating to employment. And we know that there is little data for most of the sustainable development goal indicators. And in order to track progress at the national, regional, or global level, large amounts of high quality, timely, disaggregated data is needed. And initiatives like Washington Group on Disability Statistics, Disability Data Portal, the Global Disability Summit commitments warrants the progress towards disaggregated disability data. Nevertheless, accelerated action is needed for comprehensive understanding of the disability landscape to realize the sustainable development goals for all. So now I'd like to invite Valentina Staveska, who is the senior statistician at the International Labour Organization, to provide insight about disability data informing labor market policies and interventions. Valentina has over 23 years of experience at ILO, developing international statistical standards in labor statistics and providing technical support to countries wishing to implement these standards. Since 2014, she has been the focal point for statistics on employment characteristics of people with disabilities and leading work on the development of the disability module for labor force survey. Valentina, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Mappa, and thank you, the organizers, for giving a chance to talk about the importance of statistical data for monitoring the progress towards both national and international goals. So I have prepared a short presentation, so I'll share my screen. Okay, so my presentation, in my presentation, I will say a few words about the labor market characteristics of persons with disabilities and gaps in the labor market outcomes between persons with and without disabilities. I will also cover briefly the effect of COVID pandemic on the job losses and income losses, and the global estimates on the impact of COVID on the labor market. Then I'll say a few words about the data requirements for monitoring the progress towards goals, national or international. We'll talk briefly also about the availability of disability data, especially labor market indicators disaggregated by disability status. About the ILO actions and recommendations to improve the situation of and availability of statistics on employment characteristics of persons with disabilities, about the labor force survey disability module that has been developed jointly with Washington Group on Disability Statistics, and also finally a few words about the challenges in implementing and collecting statistics on employment characteristics of persons with disabilities. So the first is, to see what is the situation of persons with disabilities in the labor market. We all know throughout the world, in both developed and developing countries, that persons with disabilities are far more likely to be outside the labor force, inactive. In most of the countries, unemployment rate for persons with disabilities are higher. Across all age groups, persons with disabilities are much less likely to be employed and more likely to experience poverty. When they are employed, and the likelihood of them being employed is much lower, they are less likely to have paid jobs. Most of the persons with disabilities, especially in the developing countries, are likely to be self-employed, to work as own account workers or as contributing family workers without pay, without social protection. Also, even when they have a paid job, they are more likely to work part-time than to work a full-time. Final characteristics is that the women with disabilities face a double disadvantage in the labor market based on both their gender and their disability status. So more details about statistical data are available at the link provided at the bottom of the screen. So over the years, especially adoption of the UN Convention of Rights of Persons with Disabilities, SDG Development Agenda, and Global Disability Summit, significant progress has been made towards addressing the inequalities. However, there is still much to be done. The percentage of persons with disabilities that are employed is much lower than the persons without disabilities. And the COVID pandemic has made the situation worse and has reversed the progress made before the COVID period. Emerging evidence suggests that persons with disabilities are among the groups most affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. In many countries, social distancing measures have been imposed. Teleworking has become a common practice, and we know that persons with disabilities are less likely to have the skills, especially ICT skills, but also access to ICT technologies that are required to engage in teleworking. We know that persons with disability live in a poor household, that they have no access to ICT technologies, computers, softwares, but also their persons with disabilities are less likely to have the ICT skills required to use these ICT technologies. Also, especially in the developing countries, where most of the persons with or without disabilities work in the informal sectors. The lockdowns and the curfews measures that have been imposed by the COVID-19 related restrictions have led to a loss of income, loss of employment, and we know that those engaged in the informal sectors are not even eligible for unemployment benefits, even in the countries that do provide unemployment benefits for those which are affected by the COVID-19 restrictions. Also, in many countries, persons with disabilities are not covered by social protection schemes. Here I have some data on the impact of effect of COVID on the job losses. And as you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, as from beginning of 2019, there has been a huge, the number of jobs that have been lost is very significant. Almost 144 million jobs have been lost. So the impact of COVID pandemic on the labor market is much worse than the impact of financial crisis of 2008, 2009. On the right-hand side of the screen, you can see that the impact of COVID on the job losses by level of skills. And as you can see, the lows, almost 10% on average, about 10% of low skill jobs have been lost, compared with no job losses among the high skilled occupations. And we know that persons with disabilities are more likely to work in the low skilled jobs, which suggests that they have been affected by the job losses during the COVID crisis more than persons without disabilities. Also, I have some data here from UK and US about the employment activity of persons with disabilities in UK, as you can see from the labor force survey. There has been a significant increase in the unemployment rate for persons with disabilities from under 7% to close to 9%. At the same time, a percentage of persons with disabilities that are employed has declined, and the inactivity rate remained stable. In the US, similar pattern. In April 2020, there has been a significant increase in the unemployment rate for both persons with and without disabilities. However, the unemployment rate for persons with disabilities have increased 3 times compared with the unemployment rate for persons without disabilities that increased only twice. So a few words about the data requirements. From the at the international level, the first one is the UN Convention of Rights of Persons with Disabilities, whose objective is to ensure full participation of persons with disabilities in all domains of life. And there are 2 articles that specifically address the rights of persons with disabilities in the labor market. And Article 27 of convention sets forth the right to work on equal basis with others. That means equal employment opportunities, equal remuneration, and equal labor right. Similarly, Article 28 of the convention includes a provision for providing adequate standard of living and social protection for persons with disabilities. Article 31 of the convention calls for radical improvement in disability data collection, analysis, and monitoring in order to identify and address barriers faced by persons with disabilities and to formulate and implement policies. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development also identifies persons with disabilities as one of the vulnerable group and calls for their empowerment. Within the 2030 SDG indicator framework, there are 3 labor market indicators that require disaggregation by disability status under Goal 1 and under SDG Goal 5. The first is indicator percentage of under Goal 1 is proportion of population covered by social protection systems for persons with disabilities. Under Goal 8, we have 2 indicators: average hourly earnings by disability status and unemployment rate by disability status. Within the law, equal employment opportunities and treatment in employment for persons with disabilities, and as well other vulnerable groups, is at the center of the decent work ILO decent work agenda. Also, the ILO Convention concerning vocational rehabilitation and employment for disabled persons calls for formulation, implementation, and reviewing of national policies on vocational rehabilitation and employment of disabled person. And the ILO Decent Work, the ILO Manual on Decent Work Indicators, provides a framework for monitoring and evaluating the employment situation of persons with disabilities in the labor market. In summarize, yeah, the data collection and on generation of generating statistics on the labor market characteristics of persons with disabilities is required in order to understand the situation of persons with disabilities in the labor market, to identify barriers they face in the labor market, to formulate and implement disability policies, to assess the progress towards national, regional and international convention strategies and objectives, and to advocate the rights of persons with disabilities. So what is the situation, current situation, when it comes to the statistics on labor market characteristics of persons with disabilities? Globally, there is a lack of timely, reliable and comparable statistics. The quality and quantity of data available varies enormously across the world. Data on disability are not systematically collected. Sometimes they are collected, but they are not processed, not disseminated, or they are not disaggregated by disability status. And there are very few indicators specifically addressing the concerns of persons with disabilities. There are a number of sources that are being used to generate statistics that all affects comparability. There are different classifications, concept definitions, questions used, different indicators are being produced, and there are some discrepancies in data coming from different sources, even when the data are coming from the same source for one single country. There are different estimates of disability and different labor market profiles produced. So,
sorry,
yes.
Say, Valentina, we've run out of time, but you have a minute maybe to wrap up the key messages. Thanks.
Yes, okay, so Dialogue is trying to close data gaps by providing capacity building and strengthening countries' capacity to generate, analyze, and disseminate data. Well, Dialogue recommendation is to include as a minimum the short set of Washington Group disability question in labor force survey and other household-based survey, and to cross-tabulate the labor force characteristics against the disability status. However, disaggregation, I just want to say, I think, yeah, this is very important. Disaggregating indicator, labor market indicators by disability status may not provide sufficient evidence for designing policy for disability inclusion, because the disaggregation will just highlight the gaps in the labor market outcomes. However, they don't tell us, disaggregation doesn't tell us anything about the reasons in the labor market for these gaps in the labor market outcome. So therefore, additional data needs to be collected regarding the barriers persons with disabilities face in the labor market, obstacles they face, what are the facilitators. So therefore,
Valentina, I'm really sorry, because we have McDonald, who we need to speak for 10 minutes before we have questions. So would it be possible for the presentation to be shared with on the event side, because I don't think we have time to look at the labor force disability module, unfortunately.
Yeah, okay, I think, yeah, the presentation is available. But basically what we are suggesting is to, in addition to including the disability, Washington Group disability question, that information needs to be collected on the barriers persons face in the labor market, about the accommodation at the workplace, about the attitudes at the workplace, and about the two questions about the social protection. Thank you very much, and sorry for going over the time.
Thanks, Valentina. And sorry, I know it's really interesting. I just wanted to give sort of like sufficient time also for McDonald to come in. So thanks, Valentina. Now I just want to introduce McDonald, who is the Director General for Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. He has served in the Bureau over 5 years. Mr. Obudu has vast experience in conducting population and housing census, including the first ever successful Kenyan digital census that was conducted in 2019. He has successfully spearheaded many statistical surveys in the area of demography and social statistics, including Kenya's survey for persons with disability in 2007. So, Mr. Obudu, can I invite you to share Kenya's experience of putting in place systems to collect disability disaggregated data during the census process and anything else? Over to you. McDonald, can you hear us? Okay. We'll maybe we'll a couple of questions. Sorry for sort of like, the change in the agenda, because we really do sort of like, want to bring McDonald to hear about the Kenya's census experience. And that has been something that we've sort of like, been working, ILO, particularly as part of the i2i program, has been working very closely. So maybe if I look at a couple of questions for the earlier sort of like, from the earlier discussions, perhaps this is to, maybe to Shiro, if, I don't know, Shiro, if this is something that's already been done as part of the asset program, or maybe perhaps sort of like, something that might be coming up a bit later in your program. So to understand if there are any partnerships with employers where TVET training is co-designed to assess their needs. I think sort of like, mainly to make sure that employers or the sort of like, the main needs of the employers are also included in the curriculums that's provided, that's run by TVETs. Shiro, while you're sort of perhaps maybe thinking of the response, I also want to pose a question to Mr. Rabani. I think there are a couple of questions relating to Bangladesh Computer Council, mainly in terms of understanding, is there sort of like, are there women with disabilities who are also signing up for some of these courses? And also a little bit of understanding about the demand from persons with disability for these particular trainings. Shiro, shall I come over to you first?
Thank you. Thank you. This is an extremely important question. And yes, the project is actually partnering with the number of private companies, actually partnering with what we call the industry associations, not individual companies, but rather a collection of the companies represented by the associations. Or we also have another umbrella organization called Industry Skills Council. That's again, it's sort of like a further higher level organization that's established specifically for the purpose of linking the market information with the skills development programs. And there are two things perhaps to answer that question. So one is there is an industry association or employers association that's specifically dedicated cause of promoting the employment of the people with disabilities. That's called the Bangladesh Business and Disability Network. And we are partnering with them to actually try to, number one, is to expand the awareness raising campaigns for the larger group of employers. And secondly, to have actually their expertise on assessing our TVET education service offering to see what are the gaps, what are the important gaps that are still there to enhance the accessibility for people with disabilities. So we are partnering with that as dedicated organization of the employers to enhance the inclusiveness for the students with disabilities. And the number two is that we also, the other part is the mainstreaming part. So what we were trying to do is to actually promote this agenda of making the entire TVET ecosystem more disability inclusive or disability friendly. So that's the mainstreaming purpose. That's the mainstreaming part of it. And to do that, we have to do a lot of capacity development for the policymakers of the different agencies, and as well as the capacity development of the administrators and leaders of the institutions and the teachers themselves. So it's going to be quite a bit of heavy lifting. There is no easy solution to that, but we are under the project. We are planning to do that, and then we also have an indicator to track the outcome in terms of the share of the students with disabilities enrolled in those programs. So hopefully we can achieve these two aspects of the disability inclusiveness under the ASSET project. Thank you.
Thanks, Shiro. I think perhaps maybe going to Mr. Rabani, or I don't know, Shiro, whether you might also be able to sort of respond to the question about the demand for the trainings from people with disability, if that is something that, you know, you have sort of like, you know, done through an initial sort of survey. I think the question was about demand as well as like, you know, use of it by women with disabilities. So I'm leaving it to both Mr. Rabani and yourself to respond. Mr. Rabani, you can unmute your microphone. Not sure whether is Mr. Rabani, okay, is he still there? I can't see him. But maybe while sort of like, you know, Shiro, you probably like, you know, I don't know whether you want to sort of address that. I can sort of like, you know, come in from the experience of i2i.
Yeah, so perhaps just one comment from my side is that we actually haven't done any survey per se to actually assess the demand from the people with disabilities and what kind of training they want. But they are the experience of our counterpart, which is the Ministry of Education and Directorate of Technical Education. They have actually done some initial work in partnership with ILO to promote this disability inclusiveness, and in a few years back, and they have succeeded in enrolling about the 400 trainees with disabilities in different courses, or I think the short courses. So there are demands, and then what kind of demands, that really depends on the gender of the trainees and then where they're coming from, and then demands from the employers. But there are demands for the skills development from the students with disabilities. So, yeah, so hopefully we can also you know, facilitate and promote that demand. Stimulate the demand is also part of our agenda. Thank you.
Thanks, Shiro. And maybe just to respond, to add on to that. So during the last 6 months or maybe 8 months that the i2i program has been conducting the upskilling programs in Bangladesh, we've had about 3,000 people taking up soft skills and digital literacy programs. We did want to have, I think our aim was to have at least 40% of that to be women with disabilities, but we haven't been able to see that sort of like, you know, a target which has sort of like, you know, made us want, like, you know, add a couple of new components. So at the moment, out of the 3,000 people with disabilities, we've seen 700 women with disabilities to be part of it. The similar sort of trends are there in Kenya as well. So there are some gender sort of like, you know, gender and social norms that we are addressing through community sort of groups, which you will hear tomorrow when we have the gender specialist for the i2i program talking about gender transformative approaches that the program's using. Can I just check whether McDonald, whether you're able to join us, McDonald? Because if not, perhaps then maybe I'll go to questions.
Thank you. I hope you are able to get me.
Perfect. The floor
Wonderful.
is yours,
Thank
McDonald.
So I'm using my phone, so I think the internet connectivity is a bit weak. So let me just quickly look at the issues that I'm meant to respond to. That is the experience of putting in place systems to collect disability disaggregated data. One is that we have, as a country, we have been able to collect survey data. The last one we did was in 2007. That is a while ago. And then for administrative data, we have been collecting it on a yearly basis because we report in our economic survey. Then Of course, very little that we actually report in the economic survey, I would say. But then we had a chance in 2009 to undertake census, and in this census, we were able to include the disability component of questions, and this one we borrowed the Washington group of disability shorter set of questions. So we were able to have that one included, and we got the results of that. Now, what happened is that we were able to produce the first set of the basic results of the census, and that is volumes 1, 2, 3, and 4. And in the fourth volume, which gave the distribution of the population by socioeconomic characteristics, disability was one of the areas that were reported here. So in this this basic report for the census, we had the distribution of population of those who are aged 5 years and above. That's what we were able to collect, 5 years and above, by disability status, sex, area of residence, in which case we are talking of urban and rural. Then it was further disaggregated by county. From the national, we have the county, and then below, within each county, we have sub-counties. So we are able to report disability cases up to the sub-county level. Then we also reported the distribution of the persons with the disability by type of disability, sex, area of residence, and county and sub-county. Then the other one was the other table dealt with the distribution of persons with disability by sex. Person with the albinism. We also collected data on albinism. This was also reported by sex, area of residence, county, and sub-county. So the rest of the details of the disability-related indicators will be reported in the monographs. We are apart from the 4 basic reports, we are also coming up with 18 census monographs. So 2 of these monographs are dealing with the disability and albinism. One is on disability, and the other one is on albinism. And it is some work that is actually ongoing. So just to mention a bit of where we are with the census disability monograph, analysis has been ongoing. We had the tabulation plan. We were able to come up with the cross tabulation for disability data and other census indicators, so that we are able to dig deep into how disability relates to other set of variables and indicators. So the interpretation of the result and the report writing has been ongoing. We are about to actually finalize on that monograph. So we believe that we will be able to get a whole set of indicators arising from the census when it comes to the inclusion of disability questions in the census. Then actually, as we are planning to do the census writing, we were able to get support in terms of funding to support 5-day training workshop, and this workshop was done in February 2020. Here we were able to train the authors. Authors were taken through the areas of the key areas of disability, because previously we were not very good in how to analyze the disability data, and this time around we got experts, and these are the very same fellows who have been working on the Washington group of questions. That is the secretariat. So they were able to properly train us in this area. And the whole process was actually funded by the Leonard Cheshire through the i2i program. Now, we have gotten quite a bit of support, and a lot of support actually, I would say, that from ILO through the Innovation to Inclusion, that is the i2i program. First, in our case, we have been, as a country, we have been dealing with the coordination of the national statistical system, which is also part of our mandate. And in this case, we requested for support. So, and this is where the ILO, through the i2i program, came in and to support 5-day training program. This was a virtual meeting which was conducted in October 2020. That was last year. And we were able to bring together officials from government departments, disabled persons organizations, and other international organizations that are involved in planning, implementing, monitoring, and evaluation of programs for the PWDs. The main objective of this meeting was to launch and conduct the Disability Statistics Technical Working Committee, whose aim is to strengthen the stakeholder collaboration to support or to foster the production of a quality disability statistics in the country. Now, among the key issues that were deliberated on during this meeting that was supported by ILO through i2i program, one was that to strengthen disability data collection system by reviewing tools used for data collection, used to collect data by various stakeholders. Then number two was to use the PW data to for inclusive humanitarian action, policy programming, monitoring and evaluation. And number three, the plan for collection, compilation, and analysis of the administrative data. Then another key thing was to plan to conduct a national disability survey to fill in the disability data gaps that exist at the moment. Remember, I mentioned that the last survey we did on disability was way back in 2007. So it is long overdue, and it is important for us now to undertake a survey in this area to get fresher information. And of course, the questions will also change considerably, because what we had the other time was not really standard, but now we are lucky to have the Washington standard group of questions, which we are meant to use. Then the other thing was to mobilize the resources, and this is one area that we are keen on. Then develop work plans for disability statistics as a country, so that we are able to move together with all the players within this area in the country. And finally, to facilitate the exchange of good practices to support member stakeholders in their initiatives to provide quality PW data. So this is that is one area that we are supported in. And again, we also got support, which is actually helping us to come up with a disability monograph, the one that I had mentioned. Now, the other area of support that we have received is the details of, and this is now concerning the proposed disability survey. This is the one that is now key to us, apart from the monograph that we are working on, which is about to be completed. The survey itself requires quite some details to go through. So in February 2021, that is this year, again, through i2i program, the committee was actually funded for 2 days, and in this case, we had a face-to-face meeting and a virtual one combined together. And the key areas of deliberations, one was to look at ways of improving disability data collection in the country to address the identified data gaps. Number two is the possible indicators for the proposed national disability survey. The number three is the methodology on how to do it. Number four is how to fundraise. And number five is how to report the census, the survey results that will be arising from this survey, and particularly at the county level, other than just the national level, because we are all aware that when statistics are well disaggregated, then it finds a lot of use than when it is more of a global. So we also noted that this survey, according to the current estimation, it requires like 260 million Kenya shillings. This translates to $2.4 million US. So those are the areas that were discussed. But what arose from that meeting is that the subcommittee noted that the biggest concern was how to fundraise, and the other key concern is could we have, if we get stakeholders to help us in this, could we have a way of having these resources put in one basket for ease of operation? That is another area of concern. And the key thing here is the appeal for the development partners actually to support our survey that we are planning. I know the real timelines would be based on the availability of resources. However, we are determined that this survey should be done within this year. I know the COVID pandemic is a real worry because it brings a lot of instability, but hopefully we should be able to achieve this survey within the year if you are able to get support coming forth so that we can undertake it. Otherwise, I'm just finalizing. I'm just finalizing. So the other thing that we recognize is that there has been quite a lot of support from ILO through the i2i, and we really request that this process is still extended to an extent that we are able to fully undertake the survey. I think that is the main concern that we have. Otherwise, soon we should be able to provide a well disaggregated data through the census, which will find a lot of use. And as a country, we have not been very, very strong when it comes to disability disaggregated data. So we expect or we request a lot of support in this area if we are to be at par with other countries that have taken off ahead of us. Otherwise, thank you so much. That is what I had to share with you. I know time is running out. Thank you.
Thanks, McDonald, and thank you for joining us using your phone. I know we've sort of run over by a few minutes, but if people could sort of wait, perhaps we could sort of I think we have gone through most of the questions on the chat box, but if there are any questions that are not answered, we will also attempt to respond to them and post the responses in the online site. Maybe if I can sort of just ask a quick question to those of the speakers who are still with us, because I know it's quite late for those in Bangladesh and Thailand. Maybe McDonald, if I can come to you, because you were talking about a lot of different interventions that have been going on in Kenya. So how do we ensure that people with disability are at the center of the design of these sort of policies or initiatives? And I'd probably maybe a 1 minute sort of response from McDonald, Anika, and Shiro, and anyone else who's sort of able to join us. So McDonald, are you able to respond using your phone?
Yes, thank you so much. I should be able to respond. What we have done as a bit of statistics is to come up with what we call the Disability Technical Working Committee. And in this committee, there is representation from all the players in this area of taking care of persons with a disability. And so the representation is wide enough to the extent that we are certain that those who are following this group are actually well represented when it comes to the discussion of generating the data. Even when we talk of the coming up with the tools, they are well represented. Actually, for our case, we have gone beyond just looking at the government, the government-based organs dealing in this area of persons with disability, and gone even to the civil society to bring them on board. So we are quite a large group working together, and it is basically all inclusive. And of course, even when we established the census results, we were able to go back and have a discussion to validate the results that we had. And the inclusion was just very, very good. And we all appreciated for whatever differences that might have been seen in the results, we were able to explain, and everybody left the table very happy. That was even done before we released the results. So our level of involvement in involving the persons with the disability is actually quite high. Thank you.
Thank you, McDonald. Maybe while we sort of stay on the data side, Valentina, do you have any sort of particular insight to share on that in terms of how do we make sure that people with disability are at the center of the initiatives that you were talking about in the other disaggregated data initiatives?
Yes, thank you, Mopa. Yes, there are a number of issues. Okay, let me see. Yeah. When it comes, as I said, yeah, the situation, yeah, is regarding the availability of statistics on labor market characteristics of persons with disabilities is improving. However, there are a number of issues. There are a number of countries that are increasingly covering disability in the ongoing labor force surveys or other household-based surveys with the module on this or on employment. And however, the data are not more often than not, they are not disaggregated by disability status, or they are different concepts, definitions, classifications are being used, different questions. So that makes the comparability across countries, but also over time, yeah, more difficult. So ILO has been providing technical assistance to countries, yeah, that are having that need some help in especially analyzing the data collected through household-based surveys. Another area where the ILO is engaging is the use or comparing the data coming from statistical surveys with those coming from administrative records. In many countries, I mean, there are big differences in the estimates coming from statistical surveys vis-a-vis the data coming from administrative records, especially on the social protection. So the ILO has been also providing, assisting countries in order to align this data coming from different sources, or if it's not possible to bridge the gaps, at least to find out why the estimates are different and how they could be transmitted and understood by the policymakers. Because we know that when it comes to the statistics, there is a lot of misunderstanding, misinterpretation of the data.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Valentina. Maybe sort of quickly, any 1 minute responses from Anika and Shiro?
Thank you, Saku. Maybe just to quickly say, I think, you know, in the, I mean, if I can talk about quickly the aftermath of COVID, one of the responses that have been taken world over is through social protection, right, and the provision of cash transfers. But what it also exposed is where there are certain challenges, and one of these has been in the information system and in the identification system. So where governments have and if I speak specifically to the experience of Bangladesh, is in being able to identify those who would need it. And so in terms of, if we make it specific to persons with disability, there is, the government has already embarked, previous to COVID, on a disability survey, a detection survey, but this is not comprehensive. There's a lot of exclusion in there. And so I think going forward, this is one of the things that that overall, this being able to identify people in need is something that we will continue to work on with government. Thank you.
Thanks, Anika. Shiro, is there anything you'd like to add?
Thank you, Saku. So it's a very important question, and to be very honest, I think on the public sector side of the skills development, I think we are lagging behind in terms of ensuring the representation of the people with disabilities in the center of discussion for skills development and employment. I think our NGO colleagues are doing much more in this regard. So the Bangladesh still has, I think we still has to do quite a bit in ensuring and moving towards the direction. And then I think the working with the disability organizations such as BBDN, it will be definitely a very important first step, but there are many more steps need to be taken. And just to drawing on the experience from India, and perhaps I can share one good practice is that in India, they have industry skills council for the Disability Industry Skills Council, and their role is that number one is the policy advocacy for the government, and then two is the ensuring the curriculum adheres to the inclusiveness considerations, and the third is that they also have the authority to actually accredit the institutions as like a disability friendly training institutions or something like that. So that's actually quite a good good practices, I think, and something that we may want to try to replicate in Bangladesh moving forward. So we'll see. So yes, thank you very much. This is an extremely important question. Thank you.
Thanks, Shiro. I think Mr. Rabbani probably said online. So let me anyway bring the session to a close. So thank you very much to Tom, to Penny, to all the other panel speakers, Anika, Shiro, Rabbani, McDonald, and Valentina for taking the time to join us and share sort of like this insight with us. So this is only the start of the session, what you see at the moment in the screen. So we have 4 more sessions coming up tomorrow and the day after. If you go to the events page, you can see all the 4 sessions. There's one that's looking at private sector engagement, another one looking at the digital employment pathway, and also some of the challenges faced by women with disabilities in terms of accessing employment. Then we have a very focused session on the role of organizations for persons with disability in advocacy. And finally, we have the inclusive social protection systems that's going to share some findings from our research. We'll be closing the conference on Wednesday. You can see the times again on the event side, and we hope to summarize each of these sessions during the closing. So a summary of today's session, as well as some of the other sessions, will be shared during the closing. So I wouldn't attempt to summarize what we've discussed today now, because we are almost sort of we've run out of time. And thank you very much for those who stayed. But I hope this has been a very informative session, and we look forward to seeing you in the next few sessions that we have the next couple of days. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a lovely day, evening, afternoon, wherever you might be. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate Saku, and wonderful day or evening. Great. Bye.
Thank you very much,
Bye.
Saku. Bye.